Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the Caster Chronicles set overview review type of all-in-one video. So what I'm going to do in this, I haven't done this before, so we'll see how this goes. I'm going to just essentially go over the whole set through all the cards. It's going to be very brief over each card with the exception of ones that maybe I haven't really covered instead of the spoiler videos that I've already done. If you guys want in-depth stuff, you can look at those, but I'll go over them, giving brief thoughts as I go over them, and I'll end it with my overall thoughts on the set as a whole compared to the first booster box and second booster box and different things like that, and maybe and give thoughts and stuff along the way. So we'll see how this goes. Let me know what you guys think by the time, especially if you got to the end of it. I want to know who got to the end and all that. And before I get started, also be sure to visit Happy Little Hug Factory in the link in the description below if you're looking for Caster Chronicles singles or sealed product, including pre-ordering the next set for I think it's 60 bucks or so that they have it on there. Be sure to click the link in the description as well so they know that we sent you. Lets them know that people are interested in casters and interested in casters through us as well. So I'm going to start. So first off, we have Irie, which is a 1-cost caster. Tap her to put the top 3 cards of your deck into your graveyard, and you can tap to banish a servant. Put target servant from an allied graveyard into your hand. So it's continuing on this theme that started in the second booster set of putting stuff into your graveyard and then bouncing stuff from your graveyard back into your hand and different things like that. So I think that's really cool. I don't know how well this will work overall, especially inside of orange decks, which mainly revolve when it involves discard and discard stuff your opponent has, but we'll see. Next is Afternoon Raimi. This one is whenever an allied suites enters the field, put this card from your graveyard to your hand. Now this is super awesome because there's other cards that involve banishing casters and different things like that, and so especially inside of a sweets deck, being able to bounce things back into your hand could potentially be good. I don't know how great it is, especially with casters, since there's only so many you can have in your deck, or it can have on the field, so the amount you have in your deck, whether or not it warrants it and all that, it'd be interesting. But I like the variety that we're seeing now in a lot of these colors, especially in orange. I feel like orange has really stood out, although that could just be my bias. And these are going to be organized by color. Next we have Style. Her enter, so it's an enter effect on a caster, is search your deck for sweets, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Now this one's amazing, especially inside of orange decks, specifically sweets decks like the one I run, because you're already playing the caster, you have to play it anyways, and so playing it and automatically getting an enter effect to search for whether it's a sweet, you need to, maybe it's turn 1, and you go and you get the 1-cost cookie, play that with her, with the one you're getting from that. Or you search for a higher cost sweet, medium cost, it doesn't matter, you get, sky's the limit. So I like just the unlimited nature of her search is really awesome. Next we have Tart Chantilly. So she, as long as this card is in your graveyard, you may pay 1 less to play Tengu cards. So whether that involves putting her into the graveyard by an effect, it could be from the discard from the other caster we saw where you put the top cards of your deck into your graveyard, different things like that. But as you'll see as we go along, Tengu 48 are a huge part of this set, like ridiculously bigger part than any of the other both sets combined before. So this could potentially be a very good strategy, especially in multicolor decks where you can just pitch this in order to just universally reduce the cost of Tengu. Because think of it this way, this is a caster, so it's paying 1 to play it, but if you're able to put a caster on the field like the caster we saw before to pitch the top 3 cards of your deck, and you catch this in there, essentially you're 1 turn ahead always when you play Tengu 48, because you have that 1 ether that you're producing extra. Next we have Trainer, so banish this card and search for Polly. I'm going to brush over these super quick. There's a lot of casters like this that are just banish this, search for a different caster. They have different benefits and effects depending on the casters they're searching for. It's really just up to your preference. You can do cool stuff, like especially if they search for other color casters or different effects. Some might work well for early game and then you pitch them later on to get a later game caster, different things like that. Next we have Crunchy Crunchy Rusk. This is just a vanilla 05, but it's a sweets, and this is very important because we have a 500 zero sweets in the form of a crispy cookie. So now we have a 0500. It's our first or our second ever sweets we've had outside of crispy cookie. That is a 1 cost. So that's really awesome. I'm super excited about redoing my sweets deck. I'm gonna be that's pretty much all I'm gonna be doing is my sweets deck. Next is Strawberry Defuku. It's a 3 cost 3000 sweets. Enter effect, you can discard a sweets. If you don't, banish this card. So it's going to be easy to banish the sweets, and sometimes it could actually work in your favor because orange is really good at pulling stuff from the graveyard, especially sweets with orange Peko and level 2 orange Peko, etc. So it's not too bad of an effect. You're not doing it because the card is powerful. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not like crazy. I feel like the main thing is if you want to pitch a sweets, it's almost like an added effect you get from it. Next we have Yakushi Bao Tengu 48. So this is a 4 cost orange Tengu 48 1000 and has break. I'm going to say this once for this Tengu 48, and you can just assume that it's going to be for the rest of the Tengu 48 because it will be. All of the Tengu 48 have at end of turn put this card at the bottom of its owner's deck. That's just across all of them. They all have enter effects, I'm pretty sure, or some type of effect, but this one is look at target enemy orb, then return it. If this card was put into the field without being played from hand, corrupt that orb instead. So if you hit the break effect of it, or if it comes into the field via some other effect, there's ways to play them from the deck if I remember correctly, or if you have a way to pull it from the graveyard into the field, probably not because they're 4 costs, so they're just out of reach of things like orange Peko and stuff like that. But still, let's just say break, you're able to just corrupt an enemy orb in response to essentially them corrupting your orb, which is kind of nice. Next we have Nico Bao Tengu 48. This is a 5 cost 3000 and all Tengu you control gain an enter effect. Target enemy player discards 2 cards. So that's really cool. Imagine she's on the field and your opponent hits you and it breaks into the other Tengu. The other Tengu enters, you corrupt an orb, and your enemy gets to discard 2 cards on top of that. So it's just a nice way to just control your opponent pretty consistently, especially depending on how quickly you're able to get this card out before you start just playing a bunch of Tengu 48s, assuming that's what you're trying to do. Next is Kamiel of Temperance. It's a 7 cost 4000 Angel / Earnest. Earnest, if I remember right, is one of the subtypes that especially will work well with the starter deck cards, but has double corrupt, has DCT of 1. DCT refers to the amount of Earnest cards in your graveyard, if I remember right. Something like that. You guys can check out the very first spoiler video or the starter deck video, I believe, where I talked about DCT. I apologize, I forget off the top of my head. But enter effect as long as you have one of the requirement in your graveyard. Each player puts a servant from their graveyard to their hand. Then you may pay any amount of ether. You may put a servant with a cost equal to or less than the amount of ether paid this way, plus 3 from your hand into the field. This is a really cool and unique effect. It could hurt you a little bit depending on what your opponent has, but ideally you would play this when your opponent has a lot of ether tapped, and so you're getting the maximum benefit. But it's a really cool effect. I just like unique stuff like that. Annihilation of the Weak. It's a 2 cost conjure. Destroy all servants with total cost 2 or less. So that's really great in my opinion, especially for only cost of 2. And it's also, even though it's orange, it's a really good counter to orange because orange tends to, in my opinion, run a lot of low cost cards. At least my decks do. So that having a field wipe would be extremely strong. And yeah, so I think this would just be really good because especially field population can be really annoying. Sweets Buffet is a 4 cost barrier. Whenever an allied servant enters the field, allied sweets, my bad, enters the field, search your deck for sweets, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. At total cost of 4, I don't know if this is technically worth it, but it's still a good effect to have if you're able to get it off early. And just every time a sweets enters the field, you're able to get another sweets. If all of your servants you have are sweets, it's just a good way to just keep cycling through everything. Next, we're moving into red now. We have Ale Peruso for a caster. Corrupt tap ability of corrupt target enemy orb if an allied servant was destroyed by an enemy conjure this turn. So this is a good way to help sort of counter your opponent's destruction. If they're running conjures, that conjure field one that we just did, for example, or any other thing really. It's a way to at least get back at them and stay in the game a little bit longer. Clarice Marita, tap her, discard a caster, target allied yokai gains double corrupt until end of turn. So that's really good, especially I think late game when you might have just extra casters that you need to pitch, or maybe early game when you have a high cost one you don't necessarily want in your hand anyway, so you can pitch that in order to give something double corrupt, and you can attack with something and corrupt to start the corruption process, and in response you can tap her for that ability just to make sure that the attack goes through and all that. We have Mike Barini, it's a 1 cost, or level 1 caster. Tap, put this card on the bottom of its owner's deck, corrupt target enemy orb. So this is pretty good. It'd be really cool to run a lot of these sort of things that are able to corrupt an enemy orb, but they have a certain cost to them, such as this, and so you can just populate a bunch of them and then trigger them all at once to just corrupt a whole bunch of orbs and then maybe swing in for a game or something like that. We have Radius. Banish this card, search your deck for a level 1 card, and yeah, before I get into too much detail, one of the caster searches. Ruby, target allied Tengu gains plus 1,000 attack till end of turn, so that's really good, especially with how high some of those Tengu's attacks go, in addition to their other effects. And so if you're running a Tengu deck, there's no reason not to run this. Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Next we have Little Red Riding Hood. This is a 2-cost servant, 500/500. Yokai, enter, target any number of servants, discard your hand. If the total cost of servants targeted this way is equal to or less than the amount of cards discarded, destroy them. So if your opponent has a 3-cost and a 2-cost servant, and you discard 5 cards, you get to destroy both of those that you targeted, and so on and so forth. So this has a lot of potential. I think it works really good late game when maybe you've pulled a bunch of cards in your hand that you want to get rid of and clear the field for a hit. But it works really well early game to get rid of a lot of low cost stuff and get rid of maybe some junk cards in your hand. It's just a really cool card, and like I said, I like unique effects like that. Next we have Bloom Lady. It's a 3-cost servant, 1,000/1,000. Enter. It's a yokai. Discard your hand, then draw the same number of cards. So this is sort of a card cycle. I saw this a lot inside of Pokemon, was a big thing of discarding and then drawing that same number, or shuffling your hand into your deck, different things like that. So I really like those types of effects. Next we have Ajari Tengu 48, 4-cost 1,000/1,000 with Break. Its enter ability is put target servant with total cost 2 or less from an allied graveyard into your hand, and if it was put in the field without being played, then you put it into the field instead. So once again, if it breaks into the field or something like that, you get that effect. So really cool all around. I'm really liking a lot of I'm just imagining a lot of these sort of combos that could be going off with these Tengu 48s, especially the ones that blanketly give Tengu 48s enter abilities combined with their enter abilities, especially if your opponent breaks, maybe with a double corrupt, so you're just like breaking and breaking Tengu 48. Just have a deck, a full deck just full of the max number of Tengu 48s you can do. Next we have Garan Bao Tengu 48. It's a 5-cost 3,000/3,000. All Tengu you control gain enter corrupt target orb. So now imagine, if you will, you have this one and the other one out for whatever reason, and so now every time your opponent corrupts and they corrupt 2 orbs, they both are Tengu 48, and they enter, they corrupt an orb, and your opponent discards 2 cards. Another one comes in, you corrupt another orb, your opponent discards 2 cards. So your opponent discarded 4 cards and you've traded orbs, and now you have 2 extra bodies on the field. That's the type of stuff that would be super cool to see. Next we have Raphael of Mercy. It's a 7-cost 4,000/5,000. Angel in Earnest. Has double corrupt. So it's DCT of 1. Its enter ability is kind of interesting. You destroy all servants with the total cost of 5 or less. So that's a pretty big blanket effect. It applies to yourself and your opponent as well. If your opponents had 3 servants destroyed, they get to choose one of those in the graveyard that were destroyed and put it back into their hand. If you had 3 servants destroyed that way, you get to choose one of them and either put it into your hand or put it into the field. So once again, really cool and unique effects. I could see this being used quite a few ways, and just that sheer high threshold for that field destroy is really cool. Next we have Tantrum. So this is a 2-cost conjure with quick cast. Destroy target enemy servant if it hasn't attacked this turn. Play this card only during your opponent's end phase. So you can only play this on, say, a reverse position servant or a servant with slow start your opponent played. Different things like that, but it's still really strong. It gets rid of pesky, really beefy servants that are in reverse position, and maybe a beefy one that has slow start in order to make up for how strong it is. So a lot of good things that can come out of that. Furious Collision is a 3-cost conjure. Put target allied caster into an allied servant zone. That caster gains double corrupt and it also gains at end of turn. Put this card into its owner's hand and it becomes a 5,000 allied servant. So this card is super cool. It allows you to have versatility with your casters and put something out there. You can, I assume it doesn't untap, so you can't like tap your casters to play it and then grab one of the tap casters and put them out there. But it still gives you a lot of cool stuff, getting something double corrupt and then swinging in with it. Then bounces back to your hand. I don't know if it becomes a 5,000 servant and stays on the field like a token and while it bounces into your hand, or if it becomes a servant inside of your hand and is now permanently a 5,000 servant. I'm kind of confused with that. Maybe you guys can let me know below. Maybe I'm just being dumb, but yeah, it's super cool though still. So moving on to green, we got Clear Bezin. Reveal this card from your hand. Put this card into your caster zone rested. Play this ability only if an allied caster named Clear Bezin was returned from the caster zone to its owner's hand this turn, and you don't control a Clear Bezos. This ability can't be chased. So this is really interesting. I'm not sure the exact circumstances of it being balanced, but I could see it being really strong in a lot of different ways, depending on the types of decks it used. Like I said, I'm not sure the circumstances of the bouncing. Next we have Sheer Gray. Produce 1 ether of any element. Spend this ether only to play Tengu. So it technically produces green ether, but if you're using it to play Tengu, it produces anything you want. I think there might be another one or two of these somewhere around here, but this is definitely a must-have if you do one of those cool Tengu decks that are going to combo off like I was talking about. Next we have Vert Frice. Tap, destroy target enemy servant if it hasn't attacked this turn. Play this ability only during your opponent's end phase. So same thing as before. It's literally identical. So that could be pretty interesting, just clearing out servants left and right. Next we have Mary Alum. Reveal this card from your hand. Put this card into your caster zone rested. Play this ability only if an enemy servant was returned from the field to their owner's hand this turn and you don't control Mary Alum. This ability can't be chased. So once again, really interesting way to just populate your caster zone. This one's a lot easier to play off, I feel like. So you could play an ability maybe that bounces an enemy servant back to their hand, or maybe your opponent played something that bounced it to their hand, such as, no, because I don't think that's considered a servant, but there's a lot of different circumstances, so it allows you just to potentially cheat in a caster if the circumstances provide themselves. Next, you have Rochelle Dieheart. Banish this card, search your deck for another level 1. Next, we have Ronin Girl. It's a 1-cost 500 Genji and Heishi. So, whenever another servant enters the field, put this card into its owner's hand. This would be an example of a servant bouncing that would allow, if your opponent played this, it would allow you to play that caster we just talked about. Really interesting. I'm not sure well, I'm sure people can tell me once again the uses of it, but I'm sure it's pretty interesting. Paradise Dragonfly is a 3-cost servant, 4,000. Has slow start, and it has double corrupt. And at end of turn, put this card into its owner's hand. So, not sure. I just saw the flavor text also. If you guys see that flavor text, that's awesome. But I'm not sure how to use this. Maybe is it just me? I'm not sure how you use this. Maybe I'm missing an effect that happened. Someone needs to tell me how this card is used. Next we have Sanjuku Bao Tengu 48. It's a 4-cost 1,000 with break, and enter target servant gains plus 1,000 attack till end of turn if this card was put into the field without being played. return it to its owner's hand instead. So this is a way, for example, you could, if this gets its break effect, you break it, you bounce a servant, and then you get to put that caster, if it's in your hand, into your caster zone, all within just getting something, an orb corrupted. So that could potentially be a really great combo. Next we have Colin Bao Tengu 48, 5 cost 3000, 3000. At all Tengu you control, get an enter, return target servant to its owner's hand. So you could just be bouncing stuff left and right, and that would also be pretty cool. So you could be clearing the field on top of corrupting orbs, or maybe clearing the field and having your opponent discard their cards, so you basically have complete control over your opponent. You can just really stack these in a really cool way. Next we have Michelle, something of diligence, 7 cost servant, 6000, 5000 angel and earnest with double corrupt, DCT of 1. Whenever this card attacks, return target servant to its owner's hand. Second ability, DCT of 1. At end of turn, return target servant to its owner's hand if this card is reversed. So you basically have a choice. You can either attack with this card or put it in reverse. You have 2 different effects to choose from, but you're not losing out either way, which is kind of nice. We have Salvation by Faith, a 2 cost barrier for green. Each player can only play 1 non-ether caster ability per turn. So with the exception of actually playing cards from your hand, you could only use 1 tap ability or 1 passive ability, whether it's banish or some sort of continuous thing. You only get to do it once per turn, so you can't stack stuff. So that's a really cool, and it's a cheap barrier, so it's a nice way to control your opponent. I think green is going to has a lot of cool control stuff going for it right now. Stop Thinking is a 3 cost barrier. All spells and abilities can't be chased. So this applies to your opponent as well, but if they're not running a spell, well, I guess everything is a spell, but if they're not running a deck that's really reliant on that, on stuff not being chased, then it could really work in your favor, especially if you're constantly pitching stuff that you don't want to be chased. It depends on the deck you're running, really, on where this is useful. Moving on to Darkness, we got Skulls. Tap abilities, draw a card if an allied servant corrupted an enemy orb this turn. So I lost my train of thought there. This applies not only to just attacking and corrupting orbs, but say if you're doing your Tengu combos and it has all of them have the enter effect because you have the Tengu out there when they enter the corrupt an enemy orb. You could be corrupting stuff left and right, and that really helps with the consistency of that tap ability, so that could be really cool. Violet Reese, tap target allied Tengu, gains Hubris until end of turn. Hubris is where you can attack your opponent directly regardless of the position of their servants. So once again, inside of a Tengu deck, that's pretty much a must-have. Pario Marito. Tap destroy target reversed enemy servant if an allied servant corrupted an enemy orb this turn. Once again, that can apply to just direct corrupting or the enter ability to corrupt or corrupting. Well, I guess it only applies to servants, so yeah, that's the main stuff. And so being able to destroy an enemy servant would be pretty good. It's reversed, so odds are you attacked with either Hubris or you got it off with an enter ability, some random effect. Mega Sneak, draw a card if an enemy servant hasn't, there's a typo, but hasn't attacked this turn. Play this ability only during your opponent's end phase once again. Mecha Rizzle, banish this card. Search your deck for level 1. And we have Sadistic Queen. It's a 4-cost servant with 3000 attack. It's a yokai with Hubris. So, pretty straightforward, pretty decent card. Riku Bao, Tengu 48. It's a 4-cost servant, 1000 with break. Enter, put rest target enemy servant. If it was put in the field without being played from hand, destroy it instead. So, since we're switching to the color black, we're switching to destruction instead of bouncing. And it's probably one of the better enter effects from its break ability from these Tengu 48s. We have Arrogant Murasaki. It's a 5-cost servant, 3000 with Hubris, and this card cannot be attacked by enemy servants or targeted by conjures while rested. So if you attack with its 3000 with its Hubris, you get to do basically whatever you want when you're attacking with it. And now that it's rested, you don't worry for the most part, you don't have to worry about it being destroyed. It can still be destroyed, I think, by that 7 cost servant that destroys all 5 cost or less, because I don't think that card targets in the same Force of Will rules for that. But outside of that, it's pretty much indestructible as long as you're attacking with it. So that's pretty awesome. We have Chikabao Tengu 48. It's a 5 cost, 3,000, 3,000. All Tengu you control can enter destroyed target rested enemy servant. So we get to add destruction to our list of things we could possibly stack. Next we have Zadkiel of Humility, a 7 cost servant, 5,000, 5,000, Angel and Earnest, double corrupt. It has a DCT of 1, which gives it the enter effect of banish any amount of servants you control. Target enemy player banishes an equal amount of servants. So I think that really works in your favor, especially if you at minimum after entering her, after she's in the field, if you control at least one more servant than them, which would be this servant, then you're in the clear and have you're pretty much licensed to do a lot of cool stuff. Arrogance. This is a 1 cost conjure with quick cast. Destroy target enemy servant if it costs less than the highest cost servant you control. So imagine you have a 5 cost or a 7 cost servant on the field. You pretty much can destroy almost any servant in the game that your opponent could possibly control for 1 cost and for quick cast. So you can do it at any point in time. So you could wait for your opponent to play out their main phase, see if they put any strong servants on there that you want to destroy right out of the ones on the field. That's a really great card, really good. Civil Attitude, 2 cost barrier. Allied casters cannot be targeted by enemy spells or abilities. That's amazing. That's really strong. For only 2 cost 2, usually barriers tend to be a little bit higher cost for their effects, which is why I usually don't run them. But that's a really great value for giving your stuff essentially barrier. Moving on to yellow, we have Serenity Insomnia, playing enter ability of target allied Tengu. So you get to just tap her and just trigger an enter ability, whether that's the destroy ability, it could be the corruption ability, it could be if you have the Tengu that gives everything a certain enter ability, then you can have a variety of enter abilities possibly to choose from. That's just really cool, I think. We have Taraji Anazui, cancel target ability of an allied cryptid. I'll mention that if there were cards in the set that applies to. Toto Anime Sutu, search ability. Hululu, discard a caster. You may pay 2 less to play your next conjure this turn. This cost can't be reduced lower than 1. So since you're tapping her for that ability, you're essentially reducing by 1. So I don't think it's that great, but it could potentially be good, especially if you're pitching a caster that you don't necessarily need. Little Laurier, tap, draw a card if an allied spell or ability corrupted an enemy orb this turn. So this sort of helps with some of those spells and abilities that we are seeing really populate inside of this set. You'll notice that they printed a lot of cards that help, not necessarily counter, but although there are ones that counter, but ones that react to a lot of abilities in the set, which is nice to see. Cash Cat, 1 cost servant, 0500 yokai. Enter, each player draws a card. Enter, look at target enemy orb, then return it. So this one is really cool. So it's kind of like the other card we've seen, the yellow bird, where you get to look at enemy orb, but it has the added effect if you get to draw a card. Your opponent draws a card as well, but it could be worth it, especially early game. We have Goblin Moneylender. So this is a 2 cost servant, 3,000, 3,000. So this one is a cryptid. Okay, so cryptids, now that I remember, are a lot of times have these effects. So this one, enter. Play rock, paper, scissors with target enemy player. The winning draw draws 2 cards. Last words, play rock, paper, scissors with target enemy player. The loser discards 3 cards. So this is hilarious. I really like this card. Like I said, I like unique stuff, and this is unique and kind of funny. But you could also cancel one of these abilities. And with that caster we mentioned, you have to cancel the ability before you play. You can't play rock, paper, scissors, lose, and then cancel the ability, because as soon as you play rock, paper, scissors, you're allowing the ability to resolve. So it has to be before that. But still, it's super cool. But cryptids, I usually apply to these goblins, I believe, and these goblins a lot of times have effects like switching to your opponent's side and stuff like that. So that caster is a really good way to counter that. We have a Dandoku Bao Tengu 48, 4-cost servant, 1000 with break. Draw a card. If this card was put into the field without being played from hand, draw an additional card. So you could potentially draw 2 cards if she gets broken from your orb zone. Zenki Bao Tengu 48, 5-cost 3000. All Tengu gain enter. Put card from your hand into an allied orb zone face down as an orb. So adds more to that yellow, just populating your orb zone and really getting that up there, which could be pretty hilarious. I want to make a yellow deck that's just concentrates on just getting as many cards as possible into your orb zone, which would be pretty funny, I think. Cassiel of Charity is 7-cost servant, 3000, Angel Earnest, double corrupt, DCT of 1 whenever this card attacks. Put a card from your hand into an allied orb zone face down as an orb. This card isn't nearly as good as some of the other 7-cost servants we've seen, but it's still pretty good inside the yellow deck, especially if you're going for that orb zone population. Scrounge is a 3-cost conjure with break. It's cool to see a spell with break, conjure with break. We haven't seen too much of that. Put a card from your hand into an allied orb zone face down as an orb. So you're basically breaking this out of your orb zone and then replacing it with some other card. So that's pretty funny. Starting anew. It's a 5-cost conjure. Discard your hand. Take an extra turn after this one. Remove this card from game as it resolves. So make sure you can't play it again during the game. And being able to take an extra turn, that's amazing, especially inside of this where just attacking more is really important. Discarding your hand is not a big deal. You could have 1 or 0 cards in your hand, so it really doesn't affect you. And when you start over, you get to draw a card anew anyways. And you could have effects that let you draw more cards from your casters as well. But I think that's super cool. Moving on to blue, we have Aqua Cronus. Draw a card if you have less cards in your hand than your opponent. So, blue, populating your hand, that makes sense. Gabby Anchor, search for level 1. Quella Moringa, banish this card, search your deck for a Tengu, reveal it and put it in your hand, and then shuffle your deck. I don't know if that's necessarily that good, especially with the amount of ether you need to play those Tengu anyways, but I guess if you're playing like say with the caster that's in your graveyard to play 1 less to play Tengu, it kind of makes up for it in different other effects, so it could be good. Cheryl Thomas, as long as there are less allied servants than enemy servants, allied servants can't be attacked until end of turn. If reverse servants can't be attacked, the player may be attacked instead. So that's pretty cool, especially when you want to preserve your servants, and if they're really low cost, like say you have a bunch of 500 zeros or something like that, it's a way to preserve them. Granted, you'll be being hit in the face instead though. Linerite. It's draw a card if an enemy player played an enter ability this turn, so whole lot of enter abilities in this set, so odds are you'll be able to use her ability pretty consistently. Baked Rice Cake, 1-cost servant, 0500 with, and it's a sweet, it's a blue sweet, so that's kind of interesting. Last words, gain control of target enemy servant with a cost of 1. That's really awesome. You can have this on the field. Relatively easy to get this into the graveyard, and then you just get to gain control of something, and especially it wouldn't have enter effects, but cool stuff I think. Next we have Jealous Doctor. It's a 3-cost servant, 2000, cryptid. Banish this card, destroy target enemy servant if it corrupted an orb this turn. So it's decent stats, not that great, but that banish effect could potentially be good. It is in a response to you being hit, so that kind of sucks. It's not like preemptive, but that could see potential. Next we have Takabao Tengu 48, 4-cost 1000. Break, enter, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, then put them back in any order. If this card basically had the break effect happen, search your deck for a card instead, then shuffle the rest of your deck and put that card on top of it. So being able to search for any card you want potentially is really strong. Although a little bit weaker effect out of the Tengus we've seen so far, in my opinion, but yeah. Next we have Fukabao, Tengu 48. All Tengu you control gain enter. Search your deck for an entity with the same name as target enemy entity. Reveal it and put it to your hand, then shuffle your deck. A lot of assumptions going on there that you would even be playing a deck that would run any card that you would run. It does specify entities, so that applies to casters and servants and barriers alike. Yeah, I'm not sure how useful that could be overall though. Gabriel Patience, 7-cost servant, 4,000 Angel Earnest, double corrupt, DCT of 1 with last words. If target enemy player controls more servants than you, return this card to its owner's hand. It's okay, once again. It's kind of cool, it bounces back into your hand, potentially. It would have been better if it could bounce to the field, just keep bouncing back and forth, although that could be strong, but at 7 costs, that does kind of suck a little bit. Cunning, it's a 1-cost conjure, earnest. Target enemy player reveals their hand, so having knowledge of your opponent's hand could potentially be really good. I don't know what stuff it could combo off of, if anything, so it's really just for the knowledge you're working for. Sage's Book is a 1-cost conjure, earnest, draw a card. Just pretty straightforward there. Pretty cool. Moving on to pink now, we have Atoil Rose. So tap, discard a caster. Enemy servants must attack target allied servants if able until end of turn. So it says target allied servants, so I wonder if that means if they have 3 servants, you can choose 3 of your servants. If you have 3, if you can have them all attack just 1 servant. I'm not sure the wording of it, the specifications, but it sounds pretty good to me overall. Aranshila, search your deck for a caster with the same name as target caster in an enemy graveyard, reveal it and put it to your hand, then shuffle your deck. That's even more specific. I don't know about that. Shah Rabios, love the art on this card. Whenever you gain control of an enemy servant, recover this card. That could work with the 1-cost we saw before, and a bunch of other cards obviously as well, so being able to recover it and then play more ether, that could potentially be really cool. Potatia, search for level 1. Poly, cancel target automatic ability of an allied Tengu. That'll stop them bouncing into the bottom of your deck there at end of turn ability. So that's really like a must-have inside of any Tengu 48 deck. Being able to hold on to those Tengus until your next turn, that could potentially, or even indefinitely if you keep using her for that ability only, is really strong. We have Cleopatra, 2-cost servant, 500, heroic spirit, has last words. Target enemy player banishes a servant. Banishment is really good because it doesn't target, so it can get around some of those, like for example that servant we talked about earlier. And yeah, it could be a potentially at minimum even trade overall. Yane Guafai, 3-cost servant, 1,000 heroic spirit, last words. Put the top card of your deck into an allied caster zone face down as a caster. I really like that. It basically puts you 1 turn ahead. I mean, granted, you could lose a really good card or a really good caster that you wouldn't face up, but I think at the end of the day, it's still worth it. Kazakuro Bao, Tengu 48, 4-cost servant, 1,000. Break, enter, put target caster in an allied graveyard into your hand. If this card put from somewhere besides your hand, and if that caster is level 1 and you don't control caster with the same name, put it into your caster zone. So potentially you could grab a caster, level 1 caster that you was put into your graveyard, or you put into your graveyard and put it back into your caster zone. Or if it was pitched from your hand, then it's going there for the first time. But still, really good. Konkabao, Tengu 48, it's a 5-cost servant, 3,000. All Tengu can gain enter. Put target caster from allied graveyard into your hand. It's okay. I don't think that's that great. Aniel of Chastity, 7-cost servant, 5,000 Angel Earnest, double corrupt, DCT of 1. If there are no servants in an enemy's graveyard, this card gains 2,000 attack and triple corrupt. So somehow, for some reason, if there are no servants in your enemy's graveyard, this is now a 7,000, 5,000 with triple corrupt. I assume that replaces the double corrupt effect, But still, that's really awesome. They could have no servants, especially if it's a pure Tengu 48 deck. Those Tengus a lot of times are never going to hit the graveyard. They're just going to be cycled into their deck over and over again. So that could be pretty good potentially. Cheer for me. It's a 4-cost Conjure Earnest. Destroy target servant. If you do, reveal cards from the top of that servant's controller's deck and to reveal a servant. Put the servant revealed this way into the field and shuffle all the other cards revealed this way into its owner's deck. This is pretty interesting. So you could obviously risk it and just destroy an enemy servant and risk them pulling a strong servant or any servant at all. You could combo it with other cards we've seen where you arrange the top 3 cards of your deck in any order, or if you search your deck for any card you wanted and put it top of your deck, and then you play this card, so you could just guarantee you're grabbing a 7 cost after you destroyed, like, just say a 1 cost or something like that. Just a way to cheat something out, but that could definitely see some potential. Provocative Temptation is a 5-cost Conjure Earnest. You may banish an ally caster. If you do, gain control of target enemy servant. That's really cool, I think, especially with the amount of stuff of pitching casters from your graveyard into your hand or back into your caster zone. It's really not that much of a loss. And being able to gain control of an enemy servant not only clears the way for it, but gives you an extra attacker, especially if it's a really big body, maybe that you couldn't get rid of, like one of those 7 costs. I think that's really cool. And it's a really good, strong card to end on as well, as far as going over those cards. So, as you can see, I feel like the power level for this set is a little bit higher than we've seen before, just consistently higher. There's obviously cards from other sets that are stronger than anything we've seen in here, but I think on average, all of the cards here felt stronger than we've seen before. I'm curious what you guys think as well. What cards you like, what colors you feel like stand out a lot. Obviously, Tengu 48 as a typing is really the biggest part, the biggest takeaway from the set as a whole. In the same way that it felt kind of like Soulbond Servants were in the last set, what they were known for. This is known for Tengu 48, just there's a lot more of them than there were Soulbond Servants. I still feel like Orange had a lot of cool stuff. Once again, it's probably my bias, but I feel like Orange came out really cool inside of this set. And overall, this set compared to other sets in this year, like if we were to rate, and I apologize ahead of time if I seem a little bit slower. This really lot of talking. If you can see how long this video is, if you guys are still here, let me know in the comments below. I'm curious if anyone is actually still sticking around for my review here at the end. But if I were to rate them, like say the first set was really good for an introductory set. It's, you know, if I were to give it like say a 7 out of 10. Set after that, I would give an 8 out of 10 just because the Soulbond Servants were so cool. But this set, I would probably also give it an 8 out of 10. If not a little bit higher. Possibly a little bit higher, just because I feel like the consistency, they're really starting to get that consistency down. Like when I switched from color to color for each of these different things, overall, I was like, oh yeah, that's the effect I expected out of that Tengu 48. For it to bounce or to destroy or corrupt or bring an orb into the orb zone, different things like that. Everything felt like it belonged. Everything felt pretty good power level. There wasn't any card that was like a filler card like we got in the first booster box. It felt like there's a lot of cards that were just like, oh, here's a junk card. These all just feel like really good, solid cards that I could see being played. I'd be curious, has anyone tried how it doesn't work? Probably drafting probably doesn't work inside of casters because of the way that stuff works, but it probably could, maybe. I don't know, but if it can, I feel like this set would be the most draftable set as well. But I really like it overall. I like the direction casters is going. Still not a big fan of the Japanese release that they did, but what are you gonna do? So let me know what you guys think, what your ranking is. I would probably put this set so far of what I can see. I'd go this set, then the previous Pyth Dimension or whatever, and then Battle Begins. I'm forgetting the names of the sets for some reason, but basically the order they came out in reverse as far as quality, and my favorites would go this set, second set, first set. especially in combination with that starter deck that's coming out with this. I really like that starter deck, and it works really well with a lot of cards that came out in this set as well. So I really like the direction overall. I have pretty much all the orange cards I love, but yeah, let me know what your guys' favorite colors are as well. I'm telling you guys to let me know a lot of stuff, but you should let me know. And yeah, looking forward to seeing different brews. If you guys have brews you would like to see, if you guys are already making decks for this, especially Tengu 48, please send them my way. I would love to play them on this channel at some point and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll hopefully see you guys around for more casters.